Welcome back this morning's speaker, Stephen Hassan, who's going to talk about undue influence in the digital age and how to protect yourself and help others. Stephen is the founding director of the Freedom of Mind Resource Center, a coaching, consulting, and training organization dedicated to supporting individuals to have the freedom to think clearly and freely and to consider how they want to live their lives. Stephen pioneered a breakthrough method called the strategic intervention approach, an effective and legal alternative for families to help cult members, which teaches family and friends how to strategically influence individuals involved in a cult. He is the author of Combating Cult Mind Control, A Guide to Protection, Rescue, and Recovery from Destructive Cults, Releasing the Bonds, Empowering People to Think for Themselves, and Freedom of Mind, Helping Loved Ones Leave Controlling People, Cults, and Beliefs. He is also the co-developer of Ending the Game, a non-coercive curriculum designed to educate and empower sex trafficked victims to leave pimps and traffickers. Stephen provides training workshops and seminars for mental health professionals, educators, and law enforcement officers worldwide, as well as for families of cult members. He writes and speaks about the importance of viewing ISIS and other terrorist groups as destructive cults. Most recently, he has appeared as a guest on Leah Remini's Debunking Scientology show. Earlier this month, taught psychiatry grand rounds at Harvard Medical School, and on September 11th, gave a talk at the State Department Library. It's a pleasure to welcome back Steve Hassan.
Thank you, Monica. So this is my third appearance at the Ethical Culture Society. I love the vibe, I love the idealism. It's something I carry with me in all of my work. And so when Monica said, it's time to come back, this is my third time, I said, sure. What do you want me to talk about? I don't want to say what I said the last two times. So we came up with a how to protect yourself theme. But so I'm going to give some of my thoughts and my ideas, but then we'll do questions and answers. And I really would like to hear your thoughts about what you've done to protect yourself, or what advice you might give to other people how to protect themselves in this day and age. I also want to say Monica's my oldest friend. We grew up next door, for those of you who don't know each other. So I guess I want to start there with, it really is important to have dear friends, family members, and a support system in one's life, because if you aren't alone, you can ask other people their ideas and their perspectives and have access to their resources. And it really is so important to the human condition to have friends, people you can share your heart with, your soul with, and reality test with. And even though we are dear friends, I still got deceptively recruited into a cult at Queens College, and like a good friend, Monica tried to rationally talk to me and tell me why the group was bad and why I shouldn't be involved, and I was so indoctrinated. And the more she tried, the more culty I became, and like 99.9% of everybody who has a loved one who gets under the spell or control of someone else or some other group, could be a political leader group, I might add, that's President of the United States. It can be enormously frustrating and upsetting, and the tendency is to get angry and then cut off contact. But in fact, it's the predators, it's the cults that want friends and family to cut off contact, because then they'll have less reality testing. So it's actually playing into the hand of the controller or the destructive cult to allow them to get you so upset, frustrated that you give up contact. And so for 41 years, I've been saying how important it is to do whatever's within your control to reach out to your friend, to your loved one, and just say, I miss you, or how are you, or I'm thinking of you, or I just came across a photo, remember when we did X, Y, and Z together, to bring up positive memories and positive affiliations, because in all of my research, my own personal experience, as much as brainwashing exists and mind control exists, it doesn't erase the person's soul. It doesn't erase the person's authentic self. And our authentic self does respond to love, unconditional love and respect and kindness. And if one is kind and one is giving that love, even to the most indoctrinated cult member, it's an acid to the bars of mind control. Because mind controllers really want people to be living in fear. They really want to freeze out the critical thinking part of our brain and have us do the reptilian part of our brain, the amygdala, and feel like they can't trust anyone outside of the group. And so healthy function, and now I want to just talk about healthy functioning. So this group is about ethical actions. You set me up very well for this talk. And of course, you know, the golden rule of don't do to others what you don't want done to you is a very good premise for any behavior. But I think it's really helpful to think in your mind of a continuum from healthy influence to unhealthy influence, ethical influence, unethical influence, positive mind control, destructive mind control. And maybe it's a weird thing to say positive mind control, but what I mean by that is where if you're a parent raising a young child, you are, when they're very, very young, making all the decisions for them, but it's with a mind that they're a unique person, and your job is to help them be themselves, to grow up, not to be a clone of you, but for them to be themselves, and that you want to shift your parenting appropriately developmentally as they get older, with the goal that you want them to individuate, you want them to grow up and be able to live and function independently. So that as much as you love them and you want them to be part of your life, their life is their life and not meant to exist to serve your life. And so when people say, well, what's the root of destructive mind control? Many cult leaders, if you look at their family of origin issues, they were not encouraged to be unique. They were not encouraged to think differently. They were raised by narcissistic parents who were very much about do what I tell you or else. Many of these environments involve corporal punishment, beating and torture with belts and paddles and sticks, etc. People say, Steve, what's the root of violence in the United States? I'd say beating children. It has to be number one for me. I mean, guns and the NRA is another discussion, but it's all built on that kind of notion. And I guess I want to plug a book by a former social worker friend of mine called The Holocaust Lessons. His website is stoplegalchildabuse.com. If anyone has a pen out, write it down and check out this book and this website. But basically, he assembled all the best research on why it's bad to hit children, to discipline them and such. And one of the core things and why he titled it The Holocaust Lessons was that there was research that showed that the people who hid the Jews or rebelled against the Nazis were not hit as children. They were not hit as children. The people who complied to authority and fear of authority were hit as children and told to just shut up and do what I tell you because I'm the parent, etc. It's very interesting. It's a very, very important thing to think about. So anyway, back to the continuum, just to think. So ethical mind control, it begins in the home, in the family, but developmentally appropriate, where a good parent wants the child to make mistakes and learn the consequences of their behavior, but not running out in the street where they're going to die. At that point, the parent's obligation is to intervene, of course. But ultimately, what we want is the locus of control of our minds to be in our bodies. in us, internal locus of control versus an external locus of control, which is the unethical influence. And that's what destructive mind controllers and destructive cults are all about, is this splitting of a person away from that internal locus of control to this pseudo-identity, the cult identity that has the belief system of the leadership or the ideology, right? And it's that cult identity that suppresses the real self. So there's a dissonance that's happening between that cult identity and the person's real identity. And when I ask people, and I've interviewed thousands of people who've been in different destructive relationships and groups, and I'm saying relationships because it's actually probably numerically there are more people who've been victimized by a man or a woman than by a religious cult or some other group. That's my guess. I don't have the statistics on that. But when I interview people and I say, were there any warning signs early on? They always say, yeah. And now that I think about it, he was praising me too much. It was way over the top. He was saying he wanted to marry me and we were out for dinner for the first time, you know? Or he was estranged from his family and his siblings. Or, you know, there are warning signs, but it's the people who don't follow up on the warning signs, the warning behaviors, to do independent research. They depend on the controller to give them information about who they are in their past. And many of these people, mostly cult leaders, they lie. Lie, 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 lie. They lie by omission, they lie by distortion, they do outright lies. There's no one on earth who loves women more than me. After on being caught saying, well, I just grabbed them by the genitals and they love it. Huh? That doesn't fit. And obviously when we're looking for healthy leaders and healthy people in our lives, we want people who we can trust, who are honest, who are trustworthy, that if they say they're going to do something, they actually do it. And they don't rewrite history. Oh, it was a beautiful day. The sun was shining. Excuse me, it was raining. Organization. No, it was beautiful. Huh? And what happens with normal people when somebody who's charismatic in a position of authority lies? We get confused. Wait a minute. The facts are, it was raining, and he said it wasn't. What's going on here? And the number one technique to get people under mind control is confusion. Disorient somebody. Get them out of their body, out of their critical thinking, away from their family and friends. Get them off balance. Then you can sleep deprive them, then you can manipulate their diet, then you can change their name, then you can change their clothing and do all the other things that I talk about in my books and on my website, freedomofmind.com, the BITE model. But it starts incrementally, and it often starts with friends who are smiling, who are telling you wonderful things that sound correct. You know, that you can go, yeah, I believe that. That makes sense. Yeah, I like that too. I like that too. And so I guess the number one thing I want to say, how do you protect yourself in the digital age? It's the same way to protect yourself before the internet was created, is you have to know yourself and you have to trust yourself. And you have to develop your critical thinking, and you have to have family and friends that you can say, hey, Monica, tell me what's going on with this group. What are your objections? And Monica, if she knew, if I could teleport back in time to 1974, she would say, Steve, I don't know, but if Moon is really the Messiah, you know, why don't you take a few weeks away from the group and let's research this together. Let's actually find people who know something about religion and know something about Korean CIA politics, and let's let's go and ask some challenging questions and see how they react. Because challenging questions is another one of those key defense tools that you want to ask, and to wait for a good answer. Like, not a turn the question around on you as there's something wrong with you, asking the question, oh, Steve, you have problems with trust. How come you're so suspicious? Oh, you don't like Christians? Is that so? But no, wait a minute. They didn't tell me anything about a workshop with a church. I'm Jewish. That they turned it around and made me feel like there's something wrong with me, that I was closed-minded against Christians. And they got me off my game. They got me out of me. And even though I did my best to stay centered, what I've learned in 41 years is that human beings adapt to their environments. It's how we're wired. It's how our species has evolved so tremendously, is that we're hardwired to survive and to fit into our environment. And if you're in a closed environment with Moonies, most people are going to start thinking and acting like Moonies. As much as we'd like to say, oh no, it never happened to me, I'm standing here and telling you, it happened to me. I was a pretty independent guy who had this bumper sticker, question authority, and had a ponytail, and protested the Vietnam War, and thought Nixon was a crook. Within a few months, I was fasting on the Capitol stairs for Nixon to be president, because God wanted him to be president, according to the cult leader. It's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. So, how to protect yourself in the 21st century. One big difference now is that so much of our information is online, in the hands of unknown people who can find out all kinds of details about ourselves. And one of the tricks of mind controllers is mind reading device, where they find out the information. In the old days, in the 70s, it would be asking other friends, having other people have conversations with you about your past, and then bringing it up. Oh, I had a dream about you last night. You were da 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 da. And the average person is like, whoa, that's too spooky. But maybe they have spiritual powers, or maybe, you know, some angel is communicating with them, who knows, right? But these days, with the internet, you should assume that somebody's got your information if they're trying to do a mind control manipulation pattern with you. And just understand, you should have like concentric circles emanating out from your body of trust, where, you know, who you let in to your space. Like, someone's got to be pretty darn trustworthy to let them this close for you to share the intimate details of your life. And another thing to look for in relationships is reciprocity of information. Like, if you're sharing something really vulnerable about yourself, you want that person to share as well. You know, again, if something's legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. That's what I say. I could tell you about the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Does everyone know about EFF.org? They were one of the first nonprofits to protect privacy rights in the digital age, and they still are. And if you want to know protocols of what to do to protect yourself online, go to EFF.org. Anyone over the age of 50, AARP, which is the largest consumer rights organization of people over 50, have an amazing fraud newsletter and email, and I signed up for my identity, fraud protection through them. You know what the #1 crime is in the United States? It's identity theft. It's more than anything else, and a lot of people are still using the same old passwords for all their email and everything else. You should be changing your passwords every 3 months. They should be 15 characters or longer. You should have a password manager that you have, remember, one major password and has all these other complex passwords. If you don't have that, you need to have that. You need to have two-step verification. What does that mean? That means if you have a cell phone, that it asks you if someone's logging into your account. It sends you a 6-digit thing on your phone to say, is this really you who's logging into your Gmail account? It's like, yep, that's me. And you get alerts, because it's that prevalent now. Equifax, with 143 million Americans' information, was hacked. It's absurd, but what can we do? We do what's within our control to do. And I don't want anyone to be more worried after this talk. I want you to be less worried after this talk, because the truth is that there's a lot we can do to protect ourselves and our family and our friends. And if you're losing, oh, this is the other thing I really, really want to say. I can't tell you how many people call me for help. And one of my first questions is, tell me about sleep. Are you sleeping okay? I haven't slept well for months, or I haven't slept well for weeks. It's like, okay. My sister-in-law is a neuropsychologist and a sleep expert, so. And I'm telling you, you need to sleep more, but I've had a problem with sleep, but I'm working on it. And that's what I'm saying to you. Protect yourself, because we need to be rested. The brain needs to sleep. We need to exercise. We need to eat properly. How do you protect yourself? We need to keep our batteries charged. Now, I want to ask a quick question. How many people spend more than an hour a day listening to the news? Why? Can you do anything about what you've learned, is my question. Because my dad, bless his heart, he passed away just before his 93rd birthday. He would watch 6 hours of news and he'd be depressed. And I'm like, Dad, nothing has changed from 7 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. Why don't you look at operas, or listen to music, or play with puppies, or do something that will, because there's nothing you can do about 99% of the news that you're getting. So you really want to think about information as food. And you don't want to overeat, and you only want to eat basically good food, not junk food. Now my wife's going, so why'd you buy Doritos for Matthew the other day? Because I was a kid once too. Moderation. Anyway, I digress. How am I doing on time? Has it been time for questions and answers? A few more minutes. So I want to say the freedom of mind, that's my company. Our philosophy is it's your mind, only you should control it. That ethical functioning is being in your body with the locus of control inside you, with a positive future orientation. In other words, if you find yourself thinking about the past or some past trauma more than you're living your life in the here and now, or more than you're thinking about good things that you want to plan in your life, you're out of balance. And therefore you're going to be more susceptible to somebody's negative influence on you. Spend more time nurturing yourself. I love TED Talks. I've been listening to really wonderful podcasts of inspirational people's stories of overcoming all kinds of adversities. And that's how we build resiliency. And, too many people are like so depressed and they're so hopeless, and it's like we live in an amazing time. There's so many great things happening. There's so many good people on this planet. There's so many beautiful children and grandchildren out there. We can't afford to not be up and do our best to move the things in a positive direction. And we do want to do action. That's why I'm so supportive of organizations that want to get people together, motivate them, and do things for environmental protection and change, and protecting human rights and immigration reform and such. So I'm going to wrap up and tell you that at the age of 63, I got talked into doing a doctoral program in psychology. And why? Because I really feel after 41 years like I'm still not seeing the results that I want to see on Earth. The media is not doing its proper job explaining mind control to the public. They're telling stories about horrible cults. The New York Times just had a big front page story about a horrible cult in Albany called NXIVM, or Executive Success Program, where women are being branded near their genitals. But they don't explain how does educated, affluent, wonderful people allow that to ever happen to them. They're missing that point. So what I've decided to do, or what I was talked into doing ethically, I want to change the law. I want to change the legal system's definition of how the mind works. And the way the system is, you need to publish articles in peer-reviewed journals. You need to get expert witnesses who can explain to judges and juries in order to change the law. Because right now, the word brainwashing is everywhere, but nobody knows what the hell it means, except for people who've done their homework. And for any survivor who's in the audience or maybe listening to this videotape of this talk, you're an expert. If you've lived through it, you know more than most everyone else. And the average person is walking around with this misunderstanding that there was something wrong with you, that you had this experience, versus the reality, which is that there are very sophisticated social influence techniques that are being applied very systematically. And by the way, Wikipedia is corrupted. I learned that just looking on the website for my talk. My own bio had this information on it. I don't know how it got up on the Ethical Culture Society website. But you can't trust Wikipedia. Why? Because cults have members and they have lots of money and they keep going on there and changing entries to do all the positive stuff for them and all the negative stuff on their critics, and anything about brainwashing or mind control. It used to be, when the internet started, it was a boon for us former members, activists. You could go on and learn about a group instantly. Now they hire search engine optimization manipulations and they bury all of the critical sites, or they sue people who have websites up to take the information down. When you do searches on the internet for the name of the group and the leader, plus cult, plus scam, plus brainwashing, you can't stop with the first 10 hits. You have to go 100 entries to find the real stuff, because the cults are manipulating the internet. So how to protect yourself? Think and be critically minded and understand what the destructive predators and cult groups are doing to manipulate information. Does everybody know what Snopes is? Snopes is a site you can go to find out if something is false. It's a false rumor or whatever. But I can't tell you how many people on Facebook or whatever, I don't put personal stuff up on Facebook, it's all about my business, but they'll say, don't friend this person because of blah, 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 and it's just like somebody's goofing. Someone made up a name just to see how many tens of thousands of people will share it with their friends, or such and such a story. And unfortunately, our technology has gotten to the point where they can take video of, let's say, President Obama. I watched this on one of the news shows. They can take a video of him giving a talk, and they can digitally outline his face and everything else, hire an actor to say completely different words, and mesh it so it looks completely legitimate that he's saying something, and apparently there's no way to say definitively he didn't say it, except for common sense. And they're talking about digitally watermarking all videotape that's being shot going forward, but they haven't figured that out yet. So if you see videos of people that are saying improbable things, assume that it's not real and look for verification. It's at that level. We need to really be on top of the technology. There was one last thing, I'm not remembering his name, but he was an ethicist at Google. He's since left. And he was just saying that even the programs, the Facebooks and Googles, the platforms are making decisions for us in terms of which thing to click. And we're not going, wait a minute, do I even want to click any of these? Like, is this really something I want to do? Or do I really need to check my stream, 5 times an hour or not? But it's in a sense like ringing the bell and the dog salivating. Human beings can be programmed to react that way. So we want to use our good judgment. So with that, I would like to end my formal talk and just ask for your ideas and suggestions for how to protect
It works with Facebook because when you log in, it shows you what it wants you to see. Normally based on the people you communicate with most, but it only shows you what it wants you to see at any given time. So if you actually want to see what your friends have been up to, you need to go to their pages individually. So I kind of helps bookmark them individually, and then I even have to rely on their search engine to find them.
Yeah, and I just want to comment, if you don't know it, that Europe is really, European countries are much more consumer protection oriented than we are, and they want to know where's this data going, who's getting it, and such. And we've kind of, as Americans, signed over all of this information for free with no assurances whatsoever what's going to happen with this information. And in the hands of a demagogue who declares martial law, they can get a lot of information on us that we didn't want anyone to get. And that scenario is scary. Yes, Danny?
Hi, you can take one thing, the videos of changing people. Did anybody see the ones of having the NFL players burning an American flag inside their locker room? It went all over the place. These are the people kneeling, they're against America. And you have to step back and say, wouldn't the smoke alarms and the sprinklers go off and they're burning America? Things that people can all do on Facebook is cut off access to people you don't know having access to your wall, your page.
Thank you for saying that.
Sharing.
Yes. I said to my son, you're not going to friend anyone you don't physically know. Like, it's too dangerous. Don't do it. And the obvious, Putin, there are enemies of our country who are doing disinformation as a war technique, as a cyber security war technique, and we need to not be divided, and we need to really think about our values. Yes, sir.
So, I have a question based on what you just said there and something you said earlier. I was hoping you could just reconcile a little bit for me. You said, when someone goes about and there's something involving mind control, disorientation is a major component.
Confusion, yes.
But it seems like with the election and with a lot of the ills that I see on social media, that it's not disorientation, there's more of a weird orientation where it reinforces these stereotypes people might have and plays into who they are as individuals and reaffirms this is who you are, this is who you believe in. They curate stories and fake news, etc. around
Yeah.
what that person's supposed to be. So can you maybe speak on that disorientation versus I think what we're seeing?
So, if one steps into the perspective of a controller or a manipulator or a predator, looking at the people who are the prey, the first step is to disorient them, but then you want to indoctrinate them to think the way you want them to think, to feel the way you want them to feel. So to think the way, to act the way that you want them to do. And ultimately, in terms of destructive mind control, they want to create a new identity that's in their image, that will be obedient and do whatever they tell you. That's how ISIS does it online. It's quite systematically. They used to be love bombing in person. You know, go to a dinner and people in the Mooney house, oh, Steve, you're so handsome and we love you and you're so smart and all that. Now it's online where you're going to a board or something and it's called swarming on the internet, but you don't know who it is. And in some cases, they're bots. They're not even real human beings. They're literally these artificial intelligence bots. When Trump first did his anti-Muslim speech, he's going to ban all Muslims, I wrote a Huffington Post blog that said, Trump, ISIS's greatest collaborator. And within a couple of hours, I had 200 negative comments, like calling me a libtard and all kinds of this really insulting, mean, nasty thing. I had like 5, yes, Steve, I couldn't agree more with you. Yes, it's, but now in retrospect, they must have been bots. Like, it's humanly impossible in such a short period, I think, unless maybe there's a building in Russia that they just said, let's go after this guy. I guess that's possible. But we really, yeah, so more comments? Yes.
So I teach high school in East Harlem.
Uh-huh.
Government. Out of my free government classes, 100% of the students said that they get their news from social media. 100%.
100%, yeah.
They don't watch news, they don't read news, they just on social media. So that scared the hell out of me. So I've been using Sam Weinberg. He's a professor at Stanford, a history education professor, and he's doing some really good work on fake news and research on how to look for credible sources. So just talking
Please
about-
email me. My cards are up there. Email me that reference. I read in the Times that in Italy they're starting to put courses in schools to analyze fake news. And I said, we need that here. We need to teach critical thinking and how to analyze things. There's a very good website called criticalthinking.org that I can recommend. I'm on the advisory board of something called the Open Minds Foundation.org, and we're trying to develop a preventive inoculation type of program at Open Minds. Yes? Yes?
I think critical thinking should really start in the school.
Yes.
Schools doing that.
Parents have to start, and then schools need to augment
I
that.
think the schools, regardless of classes, should teach current events, and students should be required to learn news from newspapers.
Yeah.
Following newspapers is really like a soap opera in a way, because the more you know, the more interesting it is. But I think it really has to be a big part of education.
Yeah, and as I understand it, 90% of the media is owned by 5 corporations, the television. They're conglomerates. And I'm telling you, I have experienced censorship time after time after time on the subject of mind control. Where I was interviewed, I was supposed to be on a show, and then it didn't run, like time after time after time. So there's, it really comes down to, I think, knowledge is power. We need to know what exists and how to protect ourselves. And the more we can do that, the better citizens we can be. Yes? Would I consider the Tea Party a cult? So I found the word cult to be problematic over the decades, and I basically think the best way to think about it is there are benign cults, there are destructive cults, and then there's lots in the middle that have attributes. And so what I want to avoid is all or nothing, black and white thinking and labeling people in order to forget that they're human beings and such. But can a political party be a mind control cult? I think the quintessential example is North Korea and Kim Jong-un. That's right out of the textbook of the most extreme examples of a political cult. But yes, people can get into extremes on the left and the right where they are unable to do what we call counter-attitudinal argumentation. What is counter? It means to be able to hear someone from another point of view, step into their shoes, ask them to step into your shoes, where you argue their position and they argue your position. to the point where you each feel satisfied that you really get where I'm coming from. If we had that, more of that process, I think we're going to do better as a country. But what's happening is we're objectifying the other, and we're falling into this extreme schism, which is really detrimental. And I like to believe that, you know, I was in a destructive cult. I had horrible, you know, fascist beliefs, but I was rescued. I was able to wake up and realize what the process which was done to me in all those workshops, etc. So my hope is to do programs on the internet, get people watching them. I'm thrilled about Leah Remini. Why? Because she's a celebrity former Scientologist who has the courage to tell the truth about this horrible cult. And it's changed the mentality and the culture in Hollywood. And people are watching it. How I got the State Department gig was this senior State Department official watched Leah Remini show, saw me on it, read my books, and said, you know, we don't know what to do with this ISIS and Daesh and Boko Haram, and this makes sense to me. You should come and give a talk. To which I said, okay, I'm happy to do that. Then I said, will you pay for my flight? She said, we don't have any money. But anyway, I was not, yes. Yes.
Could you comment on the relationship between the type of mind control that you've been talking about and the public relations industry? I was powerfully struck when I read that there are more PR people than there are journalists.
Mm-hmm.
Not that all PR people are bad, some of them are wonderful,
Right.
but would you comment?
Yeah, so I want to say Edward Bernays, you know that word, that name, Bernays. Edward Bernays, he was a nephew of Freud. He was the first person hired to combine psychology with business and politics. He was the first person to start applying psychological principles to how to get people to buy products, or how to need products that they never heard of or that wasn't invented yet. And he was also hired to how to get women to smoke cigarettes, by the way. He was the first person to do political campaigns. So over the century, I think it's a century now, 2017, it keeps developing, just as we've had amazing developments in science and developments in medical technology. We've had a lot of revolutions in understanding the mind and how to manipulate people. And that's unfortunately who gets hired to do PR. And so it also comes down for me with lawyers, for example, who's getting paid by Scientology. It's people who don't care about ethics. They want the money. They'll get big cash payouts, and they don't care how many people they're going to harm. And what I'm hoping is really a revolution of values and consciousness, where people start thinking about their choices and what products they want to buy and where they want to spend their time and energy and such. Yes?
I have a question.
Mhm.
Do you miss life in the cult?
Do I miss life in the cult?
Maybe there are some good
Not at all.
there weren't any good aspects about being part of a tight-knit community?
That's a different question. There were positive aspects of being part of a tight-knit community, but I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night. I used to be an English creative writing major who loved reading books. I would read 2 to 4 books a week. I didn't read any books for 2.5 years.
Wow.
Like, I was recruiting, making money, doing political activities, and I wasn't myself. I was a false self. Thank goodness I wasn't lined up in the mass weddings where Moon says you, and you get married to someone you can't even speak the same language to. But there are other people who were born into cults, like the Jehovah's Witnesses. One of my friends is in the audience. And leaving has this huge exit cost because their whole life was there, their friends, their family. They know that if they speak out, they're going to cut them off. The shunning, the disfellowshipping, it's incredibly abusive, emotionally painful. But do you miss things? I still am an idealist, and I do belong to a social justice, a Jewish temple that's very alternative up in Boston. So I love studying Torah. I love getting together and davening. I love protesting on the Boston Commons with my friends there. I like community. Community is a great thing. Yes, sir.
Aren't there just organizations that just do fact-checking now?
Are there organizations that do fact-checking now? I believe that there are efforts now. I can't tell you any that I know off the top of my head, but it's really necessary. It's really critical because people are busy. They don't have time they kind of need portals that are trustworthy. Yes. Okay, and then we're going to do lunch for a little while upstairs, right? You can talk more.
Thank you very much. You've given us a lot of insightful information. My question is on an individual mind control on an individual, particularly especially my son. My son still lives at home. His behavior, his demeanor, everything that he was up until age 20 has completely changed. The individual is focused on cell phone activity, 300 phone calls back and forth, checking in, checking out.
With a particular person who's having a negative presence?
Negative presence on my son.
Yeah, this sounds outside of the scope of this talk of how to generally protect, but I wrote a book called Freedom of Mind, How to Help Loved Ones from Controlling People, Cults, and Beliefs. And I have, free videos on my website, and I make a living when people hire me and say, hey, tell me what I should do. This is my situation. And part of the solution is connecting you with other resource people, particularly former members of a similar type group or whatever, that you might be able to figure out a way to introduce to your son to turn on the lights. And yes.
To that, when someone sees a situation like that and says, oh, well, he's an adult, he's just making bad choices. Given your background, how do you answer that?
So did everyone hear that question? If somebody says, but they're an adult and they say they're happy and leave them alone, what's my advice? If you know that something unhealthy is being done to a loved one, you'd be irresponsible to not research ways to help that loved one. I'm so grateful my family rescued me. If they didn't, I might still be there. So I wrote a book about errors in thinking, and that's one of the common ones that I keep hearing. And I say that yes, they're an adult, but there is such a thing as undue influence, and I believe my son has been a victim of it. And what I say I actually have people. I have a former government official whose son converted to Islam from Catholicism. And the son wanted to go to the Middle East to study the Quran, and his father freaked out and said, I'm going to lose my security clearance if it's on terms of his impact. He said, if you're so sure you're not being unduly influenced, will you meet with this guy, Steve Hassan, and hear what he has to say? And the kid agreed, and he came in for 3 days, and I gave him a course in what is mind control, what questions to ask, etc. And he decided he didn't want to go overseas. He's still a Muslim. My goal wasn't to convince him to be a Catholic. My job is to empower people to think for themselves, not to do what their parents want. But I would appeal to this young man and say, look, your whole life is ahead of you. There are ethical influencers and unethical influences. Let me teach you what I've learned so that you can then say to your mom or dad, I've done my homework, thank you very much. Now you've given me the tools to reality test. So that's my reaction. I think.
I'm going to end it on that.
Yeah.
You'll be